the whiteness is going away. That's why they're trying to disenfranchise so many Black people, brown people, minorities. I love TikTok, but no, I don't have free speech on there. Karens don't think they're racist. It's factual. Obama could not have done any of this. Period.
Welcome to Our National Conversation, a podcast in which we discuss politics from all angles. We are completely nonpartisan, and all views, respectfully stated, are welcome here. Our podcast is unique in that it is hosted and run by students who are focused on finding solutions to the biggest problems facing America.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Our National Conversation. My name is Sam Taylor, and I'm actually recording this in an airport today, but I really wanted to sit down and speak with our guest for today's podcast, Samson Crouppen, otherwise known as SecretServiceSam, who's cultivated quite a bit of a substantial following on social media, just giving his honest thoughts on current events, politics, public policy, celebrities. Samson, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, Sam.
Right. Okay. Well, I think we can just kind of jump right in. So on this podcast, we kind of like to pick people's brains, really understand their perspectives, talk about alternative perspectives, etc. Just try to, build bridges wherever possible. But the first question that I have for you is, what is it like to be an influencer and political commentator in our current political climate? How do you make sense of things? How do you choose what you want to talk about with all the tumult that surrounds us?
Mostly what a lot of what I choose to talk about will either be trending, or it'll be something that I really want to talk about. Like you said it perfectly up at the top. I try to cover from Justin Bieber to anything Trump administration. And it's funny because I wasn't as political on what I was doing on TikTok a couple months ago, but I've been thrown into, you can't deny every day is an insane chance to cover something. But I also, sometimes I have to hold back a little bit because right now I'm under an account ban warning because I did some video about Kim Kardashian letting Northwest not go over to Kanye's because Andrew Tate was going to be there. And I think something about the combinations of those words hit the algorithm. And so to kind of wrap up your question, it's like, I would love to speak about everything I'm passionate about, but on TikTok, I can't, I almost got my account taken away for doing a video on Luigi. So there's severe censorship on the app, and that in the end is how I choose all my stories.
Yeah, no, I mean that's an interesting problem because we've had this discourse for a while about free speech on social media. And, a lot of people will make the argument, well, you kind of need social media to engage fully in political discourse today. That's how we do it. And yet these are run by private organizations that have their own business interests, right. And it becomes really hard to balance the necessity of free speech and ensuring access to that with just the structure and the rights and so forth of the organizations and individuals who run these things. Right. I mean, before I move on to my other questions, I just kind of want to hit that a little bit.
Sure.
What's your view on how free speech plays into social media?
Free speech is everything in social media. Like you just said, legacy media is dying. You saw Joy Reid just lost her show on MSNBC, and she's amazing. And now she's back to TikTok just like me. And I call myself the #1 comedy journalist on the app, which is inflated, but look at our president inflating everything and lying, you know what I mean? So, it's, I kind of spaced on your question. I think can you ask me that again? Sorry.
Just what do you think about like the role of free speech on social media?
Right. Well, I think kind of like what I was saying earlier, that's what's getting very hard now is it isn't free speech. Now, what's interesting is I can say whatever I want on Instagram, pretty much. All my videos don't get flagged. same on YouTube, same on Facebook, but TikTok, they, I've been on an account ban for a week, so I've had to be doing things on my backup account because I can't risk losing my main account. So the free speech is not there. Like, my goal is to use this TikTok platform to get to a true, like, I enjoy doing this with you because even now that I'm talking, I'm like, oh yeah, Sam, you can talk about, the fact that TikTok, after the 15th of the month, they take every one of my videos down to 1 penny per 1,000 views. I'll have a video that got 6.8 million views and they give me like $20 because it's a penny. And that's not how RPM works. It's based on your engagement, views, likes, comments, shares. And when you see like the video has like 80,000 comments, you can see they're silencing my account. So that's the hard part. I love TikTok, but no, I don't have free speech on there because they have me by the, because this whole thing has turned into a business for me to like support my family. So I can't say what I want to say.
No, absolutely. And I mean, they've got to be kind of skittish at this point just because of the current political climate, the whole
Right.
TikTok pan debacle, et cetera. I imagine that's motivating a lot of restrictions.
Yeah, and I'm scared about it, honestly, a little bit too. My wife was talking about going to Mexico, and I was telling her how, foreign visitors, when they come in, they're supposedly plugging in your iPhone and checking out your social media and seeing if you have anything that was, anti-Israel, which I'm Jewish, which I love in this climate that, you can't have an opinion on anything. As a Jewish person, I have my Catholic friends telling me how to feel about things. And I'm like, got it. But I worry now a little bit with the things that I've said, the videos I've done. Could I be in another country and like, hey, Sam, we don't really like your videos you're making, but we're going to delay this process a little bit of you coming, and that's never really been scary to me. And I've been doing journalism like this for over a decade now. I had a show called The Spin Cycle, which was my version of The Daily Show. I had a studio, really, big budget and everything. So this is not something I'm new to. I've been doing this for over a decade. It's just, I'm finally kind of starting to break through.
Yeah. Let's maybe shift focus a little bit to another aspect of this speech on social media. I mean, the current political climate is, as we all know, very, very polarized. Both, descriptively polarized. People can't agree on various policy issues, but more so effectively polarized. Like, there's an emotional disconnect. People disdain or hate each other on the other sides, however we characterize those. So what do you think about trying to use media, whether that's social media or other forms of media, to encourage civil discussion, solutions-focused debate, respectful dialogue? I mean, is that even possible right now? And what's your experience there?
I've had a little experience with it, with just trying to talk to some friends that I know. And it's my experience is it's very hard to articulate it. And also, you're never going to convince somebody of something they just believe in their core, and like Charlie Kirk going around to college campuses and, schmarmy little picking on college kids. And, it's not productive. None of this. What I would like to see is some type of town hall where we could talk about it. And it's not me as a white guy tell you about how Black people are treated differently by the police. It's let a Black person who was, brutalized by the police tell you about that night, about that story. So then when you say, oh, George Floyd, and your racist talking points, you actually have to confront it with a real person, real feelings, real face-to-face. And I think that's the difference of what's happening now. And it's funny, it's so obvious. These billionaires have divided us into left and right. Instead of us being united, because we all have way more in common than with us than we do with them. You know what I mean? Most of us will never reach that. I don't want to be a billionaire. It doesn't look fun. It doesn't look any better than the life I'm living. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, I don't know. It's the climate right now it's just, I don't know. We need to figure out a way to convince people to come together. And like I was saying, I think some sort of town hall where you could get different, almost like Phil Donahue used to do it, where he'd have like, the leaders of the KKK and all this, and then the, Black Panthers, and like, let's discuss. And chairs got thrown sometimes. We don't want Jerry Springer. But I think it's necessary. We have to talk, and we have to also realize that whether you call it the media, whatever, how they have us all, we can't even make up our own arguments. You know what I mean? We use arguments that are told to us. We don't research it. We get a video sent to us on TikTok and and then if I don't like what you're saying, okay, I can't talk about this. That's not an option as an adult. You have to hear people's experience, how it's affecting their life. Well, and I think it's possible, but I think I don't know who can make it happen.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, I suppose the only thing that can make it happen is just individuals, acting in their own lives, and we get some sort of cultural shift. And I mean, that's very hard to try to motivate.
Right.
Because you are right. We exist in this sort of system where, you're given, okay, here are kind of the talking points, here's what all the thought leaders are saying. Here's what the parties kind of group together as their platform. And you just kind of, there's not really a lot of room for individual nuance. It's just, articulating the same canned talking points over and over again. And doing that in this system, this commercialized system of kind of developing these national media personalities, and using that in political campaigns and so forth. I mean, it's just not, it's a situation that's kind of anathema to respectful, nuanced, individualized discussion, genuinely trying to understand another human being and letting them articulate their own views, as opposed to trying to create some contrived version to fit into whatever narrative you have.
Right. And I think, just in thinking about it now, what you're saying, it's like the only answer could be trapping people in an elevator. You know what I mean? Because then they have to all work together. Then, you know what I mean? It's like, we're all scared. And because otherwise, I was realizing it, I kind of grew up in the suburbs of St. Louis, mostly white. My high school was a public school, but it was diverse for a St. Louis public school. But you realize, like, most people remain racist or sexist, homophobic, whatever, because they don't live by any of the people that they're, like I said, with those talking points, being scared of. You know what I mean? Like, and I live in Los Angeles, so I'm surrounded by, you go to the mall and you hear every language on the planet just going down the escalator. And so your stereotypes can't live very long in that atmosphere. You know what I mean? Because you have friends, you have relationships. These people are coming to your house. They're children of your children's friends. And when you live in the suburbs, a lot of times, like, I'm not racist. I know Ned at work. And you're like, well, has Ned ever been to your home? Has Ned's kids ever played with your kids? And is it, and then not just Ned. It should be, do you go to Ned's neighborhood? Do you go to Ned's? It's just people think they're commingling, and they're not. They're out in the suburbs with just what feels safe to them. I think that's a lot of what has to change. Is our ability to, you can't remain homophobic when you have close gay friends. You can't, you're more supportive of this mass immigration movement. Just for example, I have a guy coming today, my handyman. I need like a 40-foot tall ladder. And so now we got to pay $100 to rent it because his guy, who usually comes with him, self-deported. And he brought his 40-foot ladder with him, and it's like, these are the ways that you kind of save money. And that's what a lot of these people don't want to talk about. All the undocumented workers and the farmers, they are able to make more of a profit because they're able to pay these people less than what they can pay any American who can't do the job. So even down to me, to that little part, I have to pay more now because of people's racism, And so if we all had more experiences, and not even, that, just somebody close to you, a family member who could get deported, and you don't care about it if you live in the suburbs, you don't know anybody. But when you know somebody, that changes your perspective.
No, I absolutely love something that you said there, that kind of a lack of familiarity with a group of people and then stereotyping those people. That's one of the biggest drivers for this sort of polarized partisan hatred and so forth that we see throughout our political climate today. As far as I can tell, your content tends to lean fairly progressive. And so I guess I am curious, is there something that you think is often misconstrued about your beliefs or your advocacy, or ways that maybe the positions that you're arguing for are stereotyped by people, we might classify as on the other side, maybe somewhat like MAGA Republicans or something like that? Is there something you'd want to clarify to a group of people like that?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I don't like about it, is I'm a lefty libtard. Oh, Sam, you're so left, and Sam, you're a liberal. And I'm like, why? Why do you tell me what I am before I ever announced that or decided it? And I really dislike it because I just view myself as it's like right or wrong. What does it tell me? Like I even just recently, I had a woman comment on my video, a fan, and she is a trans woman who is identifies as a baby. I didn't know this, and I thought it was fascinating. I go to her page, and she's wearing like what appears to be huge diapers that look wet. They have pacifiers, and it was cool because she said to me, somebody was making fun of her in the comments. I said, hey, I think you're awesome. I don't judge. Like, do you, whatever makes you happy. And she really came to my DMs and explained how good that made her feel to just have somebody not think she was weird. And I'm like, I don't think you're weird. I'm a comedian. And I also believe that's the beauty of America. Like, if you want to do something that other people might find repulsive, disgusting, weird, there's Richie the barber who lives as like a clown. He's all tattooed. And so if you want to live as a clown, that's your freedom. It's like, if you want to live as a super conservative Christian alt-right, that's your right as well. But it made me realize, like, what do you care if it doesn't affect your direct life, like my bubble of happiness? Like, what do you care what somebody else does? And I think that's the biggest problem with where we are right now.
Yeah. And something you said there struck me. It's like in using these labels like progressive, conservative, all these other kind of ways we categorize people. I mean, that is another way to sort of feed into this system that might encourage polarization. We do this because we kind of need to. We need a narrative. We need ways to kind of, I need to figure out kind of where does this person fall, and how do I make sense of that? But in doing so, we automatically oversimplify a really nuanced individual, and we automatically attach all these assumptions and connotations to them based on that label. So if I call you, you're a progressive, then that kind of prevents me from acknowledging nuances that you have that might, defy a label like that. You're just really trying to determine how do I articulate what I think is right, regardless of what names other people are going to attach to that.
Yeah. And I mean, you hit it. And sorry, I have my little ADHD tangent. But it is that I dislike when people assume something about me. That's like, one of the 4 rules. You can't ever assume somebody doesn't like you or assume something about them without actually getting to know them and ask them. And I just like when, people come in the comments like, oh, you lefties are all the same. You guys are just cry and we love the fake little liberal tears and da da da. And it's just so like, I'm like, dig deeper. What really hurt me as like a Jewish American was when Elon Musk made 2 Nazi salutes, which were so obvious. And I've had to talk with some like close friends who really disappointed me. Like, Sam, he is autistic and he's awkward. Okay, he was sending his love. And I'm just like, look, I'm on the spectrum. I have an IEP. My wife is a speech therapist and has taught kids for like over 20 years. And I even had another autistic fan who came on in my comments and was like, that's what I hate. No person on any spectrum would ever make a Nazi salute out of excitement. They don't know to do that. That's not something you just do. And so I get, I've had to talk to my father is Jewish about it, my Jewish doctor, and say, well, you don't think Elon? No, it was awkward. Well, okay, well, what about his 4 Holocaust jokes that he followed that up with? What about speaking to the far-right party, the ADL, and telling them not to have guilt about the Holocaust? Your parents, your grandparents should not feel guilt about it, which I'm a parent. Sometimes guilt if they do something wrong, like my daughter flooded our bathtub, and I'm like, you remember when you did that. So please, part of that is learning and keeping that memory. And finally, he said, was like, did Hitler really kill anyone? So when people sit there and then deny that, and they're like, why are people not liking Tesla? Why? It's not that they don't like Tesla. They don't like that Elon Musk is a Nazi sympathizer. There's no other way. And it's hard for me to say those words because it's dangerous in this climate. But with everything he followed up, the proof is all there. And I don't know, that's what I'm very annoyed by, is the labels, and then they have their talking points, and then we can't agree.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I'm kind of curious. So we've talked about the how labels and the way that our political discourse is set up really prevents this kind of individual nuance and leads us to stereotype and classify people in a certain way. Do you feel that maybe when you look at like MAGA Republicans or conservatives and so forth, do you feel that there's a strong temptation on your end to do that same thing? Have you encountered anyone maybe who sympathizes with Trump's policies, but who defies, the MAGA stereotype in other ways? Like, I guess just kind of, turning this question around, looking at people who maybe you tend to disagree with on a lot of issues, what is the stereotyping calculus look like there? And how do you try to, I guess, get around it?
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of friends who are, the different levels, to hyper MAGA, to where this was a friend who disowned me, called me, the worst thing you can call a Jewish person, and got mad that I voted for Biden and all this ridiculousness, to friends that are on the fence, that are, like I said, can be disappointing about not recognizing when Elon made those salutes and telling me I was crazy, as a Jewish person, and not realizing the PTSD that when we see Nazi salutes, it takes me back to all the documentary footage we watched in 7th grade, making sure we never forgot about the Holocaust. So in talking to those friends, sometimes it's been hard. One who called me all his names, I cut that relationship off. And the one big difference, I'm just like, it's a cult. I loved Obama, but I never had a piece of Obama. I never had a bumper sticker. I wasn't going to put a big Obama flag on my boat, so, it's not a cult. It's a president, and what's happening now is just, and I'm going to get off on kind of on this tangent a little bit, but I saw the most honest take on what's happening from a white supremacist. And he told somebody, our forefathers did not intend for Mexican, Chinese, Black people, anybody else to run this but white people. And he says what's happening in America when they let all the borders, that the whiteness is going away. You know what I mean? That's why they're trying to disenfranchise so many Black people, brown people, minorities, because they want to maintain their whiteness. And he's just like, and it was so crazy because you're like, wow, this white supremacist is actually telling us the motives of the Project 2025, like everything they're doing, removing, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Those are all wonderful things and the irony is they're all Christians. Like, and I did a video on like, so what would Jesus say about diverse relationships? He'd say yes. What would Jesus say about equality for everybody? He'd say yes. What about inclusion? That's all. Jesus hung out with the hookers, the homeless kid, washing homeless people's feet. So that's the part that kills me is it's overt racism. And they're scared that the white superiority and power is slipping. And so what they're doing now by trying to take it all over, remove Harriet Tubman from the website, Jackie Robinson, the Tuskegee Airmen, all this stuff, and critical race theory. Like, since when is critical thinking a bad thing? And reviewing history so you know not to repeat it. Like, if my dad was beating up my mom, don't you think it's good for me to understand that history so I don't go on to do that to my wife? You know what I mean? That's how we progress. And like you said, that's why I'm progressive, because it's like, it's going to move forward anyway. You might as well be part of it and not holding it back.
Yeah, so I'm going to present maybe kind of a mixed or dual reaction to what you said there, Sam. I think that you make a lot of good points that, first of all, we have to acknowledge there are absolutely white supremacists, there are bigots, and a lot of these people offer really vehement support for the Trump administration. I mean, that's indisputable. You can just see that everywhere.
Yeah.
But I do also know, among friends, among family, many people who really like the Trump administration, who interpret things as very, not kind of racist or anything like that. They don't see that policies. They look at the immigration situation, the deportations, and they see security and they see enforcing law. They don't see deporting people who look a different way or have different culture. They might look at, you mentioned DEI and kind of abolishing references to that in federal government and so forth. They might look at all of those things individually, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and say, these things are all great, but what DEI refers to in their mind is a particular ideological outlook that, has a lot of controversial theses that says, there's a lot of institutional and systemic racism that permeates American history and is maintained throughout the state. It's not just past racism and its lingering effects. It is continued, kind of oppression and so forth. And maybe they define that in various ways. There's a lot of academic debates over, how we define those terms. What do they mean? And there's a lot of complexity that goes into analyzing things like critical race theory and so forth. And, I'm just kind of curious, like, what's your reaction to someone like that who looks at the Trump administration and doesn't see overt racism, and maybe like personally, they're very much against that, or at the very least, they see themselves that way. Like, how do you interact with someone like that?
I mean, it's hard because that's honestly most of the white people I know. It's very, nobody thinks they're racist. Nobody thinks all Karens don't think they're racist. It's factual. So that's the hard part. And what I realize, we're all racist. We all have different levels of racism. Like I mentioned, it just matters on what is your friendship pool like. I've been in Black comedy my entire career. At first, it was like Eminem and 8 Mile. I was like, had to work hard to fit in for quite some time. But then after being there, you learn the culture. And I got past the stereotypes of the culture. So my comedy started, and all white people or anybody who comes into a different group of people's comedy, you start at basic level stereotypes. So if you watch Tony Hinchcliffe, most of the jokes on there when they have a Black comic on there is like, hey, don't, I thought he was gonna steal my bike. It's stealing. It's all the lowest stereotypes of Black people. Whereas when you get past those stereotypes, you learn the nuances of the culture. So your comedy is that much smarter. You know, they always say, oh, he gets invited to the cookout. That is still, for me, base level Black comedy. But we all, you know, the assimilation, like I was mentioning before, we just don't know each other that well. And so for white people, they don't think they're racist. None of my friends who you know, my friend who I said who denied Elon was making a Nazi salute, that really hurt my feelings. But I had to step back and realize that he doesn't see it, you know, and that's part of the problem. You know, I have a friend's mother who grew up in South, and they had different drinking fountains. And she said, we just didn't think anything about it. So does that mean she's not racist? She's not racist. She's not racist. But is there also a level of racism inherently by not recognizing it, by not thinking outside of these talking points? No, we have different drinking fountains because of this. We don't marry because of this. And so that's where, look, I get angry because I'm a white person who sees very clearly we all have the Black experience. I won't say because because of my friendships. I've learned it, you know what I mean? And I find very few white people getting back into that MAGA to, you know, we all talk to people. It's hard because they don't have the experience. And then they also, a lot of times, won't believe it coming from me. They have to hear somebody, we all telling them that experience. And that goes back to the town hall thing. It's hard to make those conversations happen.
Yeah. Yeah. No, lots of good points there. I mean, I think you're right. Like, we get into this topic of unconscious bias and things like that, or other cultural attitudes, and the distinction between that and something like, you know, ideological hatred or discrimination, and maybe the lines blur in some cases. I mean, it becomes a very complex, you know, issue to really get into all your definitions there and really try to, you know, classify people. I do wonder, because I've seen among my conservative friends kind of a similar complaint, but levied against, you know, what we might classify as quote unquote the left or something like that. You know, the idea that, you know, oh, they have this stereotype of, you know, Republicans or Trump supporters as, you know, uneducated, really just are in their bubbles, don't understand anything. But then, you know, they exist in their, maybe like, you know, you want to stereotype the left as something like, you know, a bunch of elites in a university and, you know, those who read their papers and get that information disseminated, or a lot of people in an urban area who really just don't understand, you know, this pro-Trump demographic, or all the nuances in it, all the individuals who have different takes on the Trump administration, things like that. I mean, you know, I guess what I'm trying to dig into is whether you think there is an error in terms of stereotyping and oversimplifying present on both sides, or whether you think, no, really the main issue here is with Trump supporters doing this, or, you know, white people doing this, or whatever else. Like, just how do you characterize that situation and that kind of symmetry or asymmetry?
Yeah, I think the error lies in the information that we're all being fed. And I think there is definitely, I know a lot of MAGA people who are good people. It's not that they're not good people. We're all good people. I think we've all just been bamboozled by this bigger thing in social media, you know, where we get all of our news. So I think the error is that we're that different. You know what I mean? We all probably like to have a drink. We probably like sit on the beach. We like to whatever, go for a bike ride. Like, there's so many things that we have men that are not hardly any. Like you said, yeah, most of my MAGA friends are rich and educated to the fullest, and they're not dumb, you know, at all. Now, did a lot of them go to like all white Catholic prep schools and think they're pretty, you know, down and all, and have no idea? Yes, because they never got out of that bubble, because that's comfortable. You know, I could have never, my dad's a lawyer in St. Louis. I could have never left St. Louis and been wealthy and been a lawyer and been in a bubble of a white suburb and think I'm cool still. And you know, But it's not that you aren't, but you have to live in somewhere like New York or LA or Miami where there's so much diversity that you can't help but have diverse relationships. Like I say, I'm an Angelino now. Like I never would have. I know every almost kind of person. Most white people can't tell the difference of different Asian people. I have Thai friends. I have Vietnamese friends. I have Filipino friends. I have Korean friends. I have Japanese friends. And that's, again, where stereotypes live, where you have some, say, a guy who's Indian and he's MAGA trying to prove to this white neighborhood, I'm MAGA. But they probably are like, well, are you Muslim? What? Are you Mexican? Like, they don't even take the time to know the difference of you, because there is just, when there's mass, when you're the minority in like suburbs. And I realize that my son goes to an all Latino school. He's a white redhead, and he's experiencing what it feels like to be a minority. And it's harder for him. And sometimes I'm like, oh God, but he's going to be stronger for it, because most white people never have to feel like a minority. And like, I'm Jewish, and I say with Jesus, do unto others as you want done to yourself. So when it's like everybody wants criminals out of our country, but why are they targeting Latinos? And that's the thing about these people who are holding these stereotypes. Latinos are the hardest working people in our country. You know what I mean? These people come into our country fleeing death. It's not like they're coming here because just nothing. They're fleeing death. And how can you have empathy for a base level, right? We all agree it should be done the right way, but what they're doing now, they're taking people who are not in gangs and they're targeting Latinos. Why are they not, why not Germans? Why not Swiss people? Asian people. I'm not saying they should be, but they should be. If they're doing this mass immigration, it should be all over. What this is doing when they're like these gang members and this, you're creating Latino hate and country when Latinos make our economy run. And to me, it's sad that we're kicking out we're a Christian nation, kicking out our most vulnerable, and so, I digress. It's hard for me to talk with my friends about this stuff and not have them think I'm a crazy lefty liberal.
Yeah.
They don't think I'm smart enough to have the conversation, but if Jon Stewart said it, they'd sit there and listen to him. And so I don't know, but that's my goal, to be able to have these and conversation with, because I'm not looking to be right. And I just want to help people understand other people's experience. And
yeah, no, absolutely. A basic requirement for engaging in these sorts of conversations is like just mutual respect. The other person has to be willing. You can't force them into something like that. You can't have a conversation with someone who's not going to respect you or listen to you. It's just, it's a two-way thing. Yeah. Well,
it really is.
We're kind of low on time here. I did want, just if you have time, I wanted to ask you maybe a little more, because you kind of go back to this point that a lot of what's happening, in terms of the structure of political discourse, the polarization, what people believe, etc. It seems that you adopt this view that it's put out there and manipulated by, the really, really wealthy. Just undeniably, there's at least some truth to that. These are people who run these, algorithms, platforms. They have a lot of power to put things out there, to get people to say things, etc. And at some level, that is just true. But maybe there's degrees of how far an individual thinks that goes, and how much power and influence we think that this class has, or how united we think it is. Kind of like, this cabal or conglomerate trying to forward its interests. What is kind of informing your perspective there? I've seen kind of recent content, on TikTok from you that says, a lot of what's happening with the tariffs right now, it's to, crash the stock market. People are going to buy really low, then sell really high, get more rich, etc. Just kind of what's leading you to believe that there is this much of kind of an influence in our discourse from the really, really wealthy. and just kind of help me to walk through your thought process there.
Right. I mean, I think it started with the Project 2025, and people were starting to get an idea about it until like this summer. I was like, it's real, man. You lefty libs, this can, and it happened. It's all happening. And so it's all like Donald Trump, what he does is he's like, no, I haven't heard of it. No, what is that? What he knows everything that's happening. They know how to play the game. They're playing it very, Al Capone style. You know what I mean? They're ruling and just doing whatever they want. Speaker Mike Johnson, who claimed to be a constitutional expert, he knows all this stuff is wrong. Calling federal judges rogue judges or Democratic activists. When if Obama said, could you imagine if I banned Fox News from the press pool? Just that alone, they would have had his head, And it goes back to this, like what I was saying earlier about the, fear of the wanting to keep white power in place is, like with Obama. Obama could not have done any of this, period. He would have, the January 6th would have looked like a Halloween party. So it's just here. It's just that it's so obvious to me. Can you tell when somebody's lying? You know what I mean? Like in all these interviews with all these confirmations, like, so will you do what the president says that he tells you to? Sir, President Trump is one of the best presidents ever. I will do everything I can to support him in all ways of the law. Like, do you yes or no question, and none of them. It kills me watching those hearings, and then an adult is able to sit up there and be like, was Elon Musk in that meeting? Sir, President Trump was the one giving those directions, and I was taking directions from. Was Elon Musk in that meeting? Sir, I was taking the directions from President Trump, and he, how can they be allowed to do that? So yes, there is a concerted effort to take. It's a coup. It's a coup right in front of our eyes, and it's so crazy. And this is what's sad, is that if any of those MAGAs, from the hyper MAGA to the middle, if Joe Biden or any Democrat, they'd be calling me up, Sam, and I would be upset about it. I would be just as upset about it. I would not be okay if Joe Biden or Obama was trying to do this. And that's the big difference to me, is that people are willing, they're all about the Constitution, Second Amendment rights, all this, until their party starts to make the decisions. And then they're like, okay, a third term, that's treacherous. Who was, if Obama mentioned a third term, would we ever say that? No, because it's not constitutional. But the fact that they're floating around like it's a joke, but it's really real, because getting back to your point, it's all been planned out. The first time was like, holy crap, he won. This time, he had these Christian nationals, the Heritage Foundation, who are very smart. They're very intelligent men, and their plan is to keep America white here and preserve that. I mean, I hate to end on that, but it's really the truth.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to continue this conversation and continue dissecting this. And absolutely, if you'd like to come on to a future episode, maybe we can have someone who is, who self-identifies as conservative come on as well to really dig into these issues. Because I do know a lot of my conservative colleagues who would, let's just say, have a very spirited discussion on whether Trump is implementing Project 2025, what the motives are behind the policies, and different things like that, whether we are sliding towards competitive authoritarianism or sort of authoritarianism, or whether this is just government efficiency, whether the third term thing is like a plan or is realistic, or whether that's just, babble. I would really love to dig into these issues more. So we can maybe plan something to do so.
Yeah. And that's what I dislike about it. And I don't like to get into arguments with people, but it is that it's like, he's just joking. He won't, I don't like that. It's like, you can't say he's joking. He just won't do that because he's done everything he says or he attempts to do. Now he just signed an executive order that he and the attorney general decide what is law in America, and you're okay with that. It's just, they, put it on the other shoe and say, would you be okay if Obama did all these things down the line? And that's what kills me, is the hypocrisy. Because I don't want to be involved in politics. I'm not left or right. I'm just Sam. You're the one usually taking the identity on. And like a lot of times, like, oh, well, that, and they have their little quick talking points to kind of put you down fast. And I'm like, I'm not into a roast battle. I'd like to have like an intelligent conversation, of really try to grow, try to progress,
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, whatever sorry if there's an announcer, as I said, I was in an airport, but, yeah, I mean, whatever we say about, I support this policy, I do think that you've given us a really important thought experiment here. Think about that policy being implemented by the other side, and can you honestly say you would still support it? If so, great, you actually believe the policy. If not, then you're just kind of following whatever canned partisan talking points you're given. I mean, I think that's something we all need to just implement on an individual level, be very, very conscious about.
Yeah, Fox News is like, guys, come on. We got to lose a little bit. The stock market, it's okay. Your 401k. Hey, I'm not worried about my 401k. Guys, look, we need to give the president a chance. Would they have ever said that about Biden? Would they have ever given that chance to Obama? Would they have ever? So it's just like, if you can't say yes to those questions, then come on. Because if it was on I would never support that. I would be voting Republican if some Democrat was trying to do away with our Constitution. As a comedian, it scares me. I'm honestly more scared now to say what I want, because I'm not sure that they can't just send me somewhere.
Yeah.
So.
Well, thank you so much, Samson, for coming on. I mean, my goal here is just to really try to dig into and understand your perspective, and you've given me, a lot to think about, a lot to work with here. So I just really appreciate it. And, once again, if ever you want to come on again, we can set something up.
Yeah, I would love it. Yeah, thank you again for your time and having me on.
This podcast was brought to you by Our National Conversation, a place where students generate policy solutions to the biggest problems facing America. Join us in freeing political dialogue from hyperpartisanship. To learn more about what you heard today, check us out at ournationalconversation.org. You can also follow us on social media at Our National Conversation to show your support and keep up with our latest efforts.